Welcome back to another session. I forget what we're calling this of, I think, relevant and
Relevant
relational.
relational? Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's
R and
the
R.
Meg and Ashley series that
Yeah.
we're piloting. That's a lot easier to remember. Welcome back. Thank you all for joining us today. Um, we have we have a fun topic, I think. I say fun, I think it'll be fun, but an interesting one that is coming up a lot. Meg has been experiencing this question a lot. And so we're just gonna get into it. Meg, um, what is this question that keeps popping up that advisors keep asking?
Yeah, I've had a lot of advisors lately. Two people stop me, like at a conference, they asked the same question, and then a couple of people have reached out on LinkedIn. And the thing that they want to know about is their client has told them, hey, I read this thing, or I was talking to chat, about this thing, and now I want to talk to you. Or I actually had two financial planners tell me that they took the financial plan that the financial planner had created, and the client like basically uploaded it into Chat or Claude, one of them, and asked Claude or Chat, to look over it and see if there was, any other things that should be thought about or whatever. And in both scenarios, like even the fact it felt like that the advisor knew that they don't want to go on the defensive, but
Mm,
it felt very hard to resist not going on the defensive
mm,
because depending on how the client presented it, in some ways, well, in both ways, the client in some ways is challenging your advice, and this feels not good, which is, I think, super understandable. None of us necessarily like that feeling. And so I thought we should talk about one. We should normalize that sort of feeling of this doesn't feel good, and also recognizing that, hey, I want to do something different, but I'm maybe not sure where to start. Um, and then maybe this is the wrong approach. But when I heard about this, like in my researcher mind, I was really excited because as a researcher, the financial literacy researchers, financial education researchers, financial advocacy, or just self-efficacy researchers, we have been struggling. We have been trying to figure out for decades about how to get people more interested in their own financial life. And even we
ooh,
even see this like in financial planning, and maybe you've heard this too. Like advisors kind of have three groups of clients. There's the delegators, the ones that
mm-hmm.
it's like, here, do this for me. I don't want to worry about that. And then the validators, they're kind of like, well, I want you to do it, but I want to like talk about it. And then there's like reformed DIYers, and that they've been doing it for a long time, and for whatever reason they don't want to do it anymore. And I think most advisors would say that they really like delegators. Validators can be okay, and sometimes it can be really hard to work with a reformed DIYer, and sometimes honestly it can be really hard to work with a validator, because there is sort of this like constant, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, when I did it, I thought about this. And again, as a researcher, and how hard we work to try to get people to be like, well, what about this? What about this? And want to be informed, that has been like a real struggle. And so I get that advisors don't like it, but at the same time, this is like very exciting, as a researcher and thinking about financial self-efficacy, and for people feeling like, it makes me think a lot about the medical field, and how now the medical field.
WebMD. Yeah.
Yes, WebMD. We love what, like, I Googled my
Yeah.
symptoms, and it
Yep.
says like how many times have doctors heard that, and I'm sure they sit there and they think, okay, client, or patient, just like we think, okay, tell me what you read. Um, but even around that, that like doctors or the medical field, and I think some ways has embraced that. We even see like hospital marketing about, we are patient advocates and all this kind of stuff. Like nobody said that, 50 years ago. They're like, no, 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 we just hire the best doctors and you listen. Like that was how the medical field worked. And so in some ways, I think we're seeing like the beginnings of what could be sort of a revolution of self-efficacy in finance because chat, because Claude, because TikTok and Reddit, whatever. There's information out there, that people can go read, and it's a good thing when they do, because if we're taking advice from the medical field, your client knows themselves best. Even if you know the strategy, they still know this will or will not work for me, or here's something else. And so again, I don't know that advisors necessarily feel very excited about this particular movement, or the ones that I were talking to were kind of like, well, I'm not really sure how much I like that.
No. Well, doctors, and even I'll even go so far as to say like even mental health clinicians, because the whole WebMD thing, when it was starting to become very, very, I'll say popular, common, right?
Yeah.
Like it does feel like a challenge, or it feels like, well, what good am I? If you're just gonna, like Google your symptoms, it does, like I know that it was a challenge. And I know that anytime like I had a client that would bring my favorite was like the print off of like the WebMD,
I never
and
did
they would
that.
bring it to session, and they would
Wow.
say, I think that I have borderline personality disorder. And because I thought this, or this happened to me 5 years ago, or like I
Yeah.
have
Okay.
experience, like they would walk through like that. And, look, I will be honest, there was a part of me that
Like, yep,
sometimes
you
was
definitely have.
really annoyed by that with particular diagnoses. Let me just say
Sure.
this, like, no, you do not have a personality disorder. Like, no, no. However, what I learned from that, and this is what I would say like to advisors who feel a little bit put off by
Hmm.
a client doing this, because I can understand, right? Like this is my
Yeah.
job. Like
Yeah.
this is my job to be doing this. Why are you doing my job? Like I felt that way. Like this is my job to diagnose. This is not your job, you know?
Hmm.
And so I had to humble myself. I'll just say that, like
Yeah.
a
Okay.
reality check, ego check, like, and this is what I learned. It is not about me. And I would say that to advisors. It is not about you. Like in any of this, when a client puts into Claude their financial plan or just questions that they have, and when
Yeah.
they bring it to you, like it is not about you at all. It is about them reaching out, extending like a hand, extending, a bid, if you will, to connect with you,
Hmm.
and a way to show and demonstrate that they actually very much value what it is that you have to say. And when I learned when I learned that when a client would bring in their 20-page WebMD print off of the symptoms, the prognosis, the
Hmm.
research, like all of that, when I learned that when they were bringing that in, it was an invitation to have a conversation with me, like the relationship was just, it was different and it was better. And thankfully, it didn't take me too long to learn that, because I know that there were probably a few clients that I turned off, or, led them to feel very dismissed. And even though I didn't outright say, hey, listen, I know what I'm doing here, I
Hmm.
am the expert, would not be surprised if the words that I said, maybe even my body language, like my tone
Sure.
communicated
I can
that.
definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure like they probably picked up on something that I was not happy and or, annoyed or even like disagreed with. And so, like I love everything that you've said here, in terms of like let's validate it for advisors. Like it does not feel good this does not feel good. A way
No.
to look at it could be that this has nothing to do with you, actually. It's not, it's actually not like about you. It's about your client. And I think when you can learn that this is about your client, the approach or strategy around how am I going to respond? How am I going to take this as like a moment and continue to build upon the relationship? I just think it changes I think it can change everything.
I totally agree. I haven't had the exact same situation, but as a professor, like especially when chat really got busy, like a couple of just even maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, it felt like all my students were like, well, I did that, looked at this, read some stuff on chat, and then they, come to class with whatever they're gonna, attempt to bring up or, counterpoint or whatever. And I was nervous, I think, about it at first because I was quite worried, like, what is even going to happen to a university job? Like, knowledge is now everywhere. Like, there's no point in
Yeah.
paying me, to teach these classes that you can just go, learn the things. But I have since come around a little bit from that in the sense that I I really like it, when the students, if this is how they can engage, and they're like, well, I read this thing, then it says to me they were excited about this.
Yeah.
They wanted to talk about it in some way. They found some connection to it that allowed them to sort of step into that. And if they find something that I have no idea what they're talking about, then also that isn't necessarily a bad thing because my role then as the professor, is to integrate that, is to have an open mind, to these different ideas and integrate them into that broader scope of like what we're really trying to do, what we're really trying to learn. It's not about who's right or wrong. And in doing this, I think that the whole class, is better for it, hearing these, different ideas where if it was just me and they were just reading the textbook and then they were just kind of regurgitating, whatever it is that I had told them, which is kind of how financial planning has happened, like the advisor said whatever, they repeated that thing, they wanted the client to repeat that thing, but that didn't ever really help anybody with understanding and didn't ever help anybody, I think, really with that feeling of feeling confident, of feeling like, okay, I can ask questions, I can understand this, I can learn this, I can be a part of the development of my plan. I think that is, yeah, it's exciting, but a change, and how then
It
to
is. Well, and
address that.
I think too something that you just said that reminded me. I'm having flashbacks to my time in the therapy room. I remember feeling like so I did not specialize in personality disorders.
Mm,
Uh Understandably so. And kudos to those clinicians that do because
yeah.
holy like bleeping bad word, like they are just incredibly difficult. Um uh but I remember like some of the common diagnoses that would get brought in with
Hmm.
the WebMD were borderline personality disorder,
Hmm.
narcissistic personality disorder,
Hmm.
and bipolar. Do you remember like that time when like bipolar like was
There was a time when everybody thought they had bipolar.
everywhere,
Yeah,
everywhere,
yeah.
everywhere, everyone was bipolar. And I remember, those were not particularly diagnoses or like specialty areas of mine. Like there was a little bit of, I felt inferior. Like they would bring these print offs and I'd be like, ooh, like I did not realize like that was a symptom like of
Sure,
bipolar,
sure.
or I didn't realize like it could manifest in that way or like this like I remember when bringing these things and being like I didn't know this, but I don't know if I'm comfortable like conveying to my client that I don't know something because I am quote unquote supposed to be like the expert
Hmm.
here. And that can be really uncomfortable. And I don't know if this is what the advisors that approached you, if they felt, or if advisors that are, listening, if this has happened. I don't know if there's a bit of uncomfortability of like, ooh, like this isn't something I thought of, like I didn't think about it this way, or like if there is some sort of like, uh-oh, like maybe this is highlighting or showing that I've missed something or, you
I
know,
think that was kind of it. That, because if
really?
you tell chat to find something, it's going
Yeah,
to find something. Now, did
sure,
it
yeah,
find a valid thing? I don't know,
right.
but it still, I think the advisor was worried that chat having found something now casts doubt in the client's mind. But I think that you would agree with me based on what you were saying earlier, about, when your clients came in and asked you this, the fact that the client didn't just call another advisor. Like the client came back in and said, "Hey, I put this through chat and I was thinking about this, and chat came back and said this and this, and I want to talk about it." That this is not distrust. This is not that you've done anything wrong. That this is the client is feeling confident enough and absolutely feeling safe enough to come to you with this other idea that they realize, might be half baked, may only be, slightly formed, because even though they can get an answer out of chat, I think all of us know at this point that it may just be being a sycophant and like trying to find something. It doesn't mean that you've done anything bad, and it doesn't mean that they think that you've done anything bad. That it is so much more this challenge, that the client is bringing to the table is really so much more a plea or a desire, to have a conversation where they feel like they can play on the same playing field, as you, and bring up these other ideas and they care enough to share those with you. So I do think that there was some fear that it's like, well, am I not good enough? Are they thinking I'm not good
Yeah.
enough? But in my experience, no, like that's not, because if that was the case, they would have just fired.
Yeah, for sure. 1,000%.
Or
Yeah.
that's the other thing, like Robinhood or
Yeah.
Acorns or Betterment, all they would have had to do is spend, I don't know, probably less than 5 minutes on an app, and they could have bought whatever they wanted. They could have, like clients have, in addition to the sheer amount of information, they also have access. There has been huge democratization of access in financial markets. And if a client really wanted to do something and was completely upset, with whatever you had done, they would just do it.
They would go and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a lot about just, maybe a few ways to think about this, like I'll say
Yeah.
when it happens, because I do believe at some point for most of it's a matter of when and not if.
Yeah.
So,
And it doesn't have
so
to be like Reddit. People can be like, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, or I was
yeah.
reading whatever, and
Or my
I've been thinking
friend,
about this, or my
like
friend. Yeah, I
my
mean,
friend told me like about
it's
this.
the same. It's the same conversation. It's just now has like a new shiny AI version of itself. But
Right. Right.
uh, yeah, it's the same
So we've
thing.
talked a lot about maybe just some different ways to think about it, validating some of it. I, I'd
I
like,
think the first trick to this, and please, you've had more experience I think than I do. But when I think about this, I think the first thing to do is say thank you. And the
yeah.
reason I think that is actually because of the advisor, not because of the
Hmm.
client. Because if you thank if you're feeling, oh, I just want to dismiss this idea, like I'm not particularly happy about this, but then if you say, thank you, client, it's so great that you're interested in this and that you've, done a little bit of research, I'm excited to learn about it. This creates cognitive dissonance in your brain. You are sort of helping yourself to
Hmm.
step into this more open version and not allow the dismissive or sort of upset feeling.
Intimidated part of you. Yeah.
You are posturing, as open, and I think that there is an aspect of fake it till you make it that can happen here, and it happens, at that brain level. And so if you can be like, hey, thank you so much, like this is great, I love that you're thinking about this, and even more, that you're bringing it in to share it with me. That this, as much as it is a lovely greeting for them, letting them know it's okay, I think it also really helps to reframe in the advisor's mind, which is, I think, the harder part for this first part.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I think that that is 1,000% would agree with you. Like that is, and I'll say should. I know should is a judgment. I don't like to should on people or things, but like I think that should be the first response, like the first words that really like come out of your mouth. When I was when we kind of pre-gamed talking about this, I know I forgot we were talking about this morning, but when we
The time you remembered before you forgot.
right, it's before I forgot. Right.
It's all coming back.
It's all, oh, don't
My
make me
Celine
start singing
Dion song was it's all coming
Celine
back. It's
Dion.
all
It's
coming back to
all,
you
yes.
now.
Oh gosh.
Yes. God,
Oh yes.
such a good song.
Throwback. Ah, take me back. That was such a good album too. Oh man. Oh, okay. We digress. Okay. So what I was thinking about though, um, knowing that we were going to be talking about this, like some of what started to come up for me was how to be approachable in
Yeah.
this moment. And there are a few ways that make you approachable. And one of them is like exactly what you just said, like thanking them for bringing that to you. It's also a way of like, um, telling them what you want them to do, right? Like from a
Yeah. You
conditioning
want them to
standpoint,
talk
like
to you.
I don't like
Yeah.
to think about it. I don't want to like mean like, we're doing some,
I love
kind of
dog. Mm-hmm.
right. This isn't like Pavlov here, but there is some level of like, like you're telling your client what you want them to
Yeah.
do, like
Works great with us.
positively reinforcing, I like when you bring these things to
Yeah.
me. Please do more of that. It's the subtext to the text, really.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how can you be approachable in this moment, and not like how I was, like very early on and probably dismissive. And like a few things come to my mind here, like one of them like saying like thank you. The other is like, I'm just imagining this scenario and a little bit from my own experience. Like if you're reading through what it is, or even just listening through what it is that the client is bringing to you, it is okay to say, hey, that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Or that makes a lot of sense. Or I haven't really thought about it in that way. That's really interesting. Now, here's the thing. Some of the things kind of being thrown at you, like maybe in your head, like, that's not going to work. That's crap. Definitely not appropriate for this situation. Like you might be going through and like some of those things might be obvious. However, what comes out of your mouth and making you approachable should be things like, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, that is a good point. Oh, I haven't thought about that. Oh, let's talk about that a little bit more. Oh, what do you think about that? Can you help me understand how this makes sense to you? Like all of these statements here and responses are what makes you approachable in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And what it's going to communicate to the client is that they can bring you things. So not only, you might have said like, "Hey, thank you so much for bringing this to me. I'm glad." But then if the rest of like your responses are like, "Well, that's actually not
It's
going to
figured
work.
again. Yeah.
No, like that's actually not really good," or no, that's not appropriate for your situation. If everything that comes after that is like you're shutting it down, like it's a no, 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 like a client's going to be like, "All right, well, you thanked me for bringing it to you, but then everything after that, you just like shut me down all the way." So I think that, the initial response, let's, thank them. So we're encouraging, but everything after that, you have to be approachable and not just with your words, but also with your body language. When I've observed like meetings, and you probably have seen this, maybe even more than I have, like the way your face looks, like your body language. I mean, you cannot be displaying RBF. And for those of you who may not be familiar with RBF, like a really sourpuss face, like, I'll say it the, like the PG way. You can't be like, if you're listening right now, you may not be able to see my face. I'm really good at facial expressions, but if you're like, and like, yeah, Yeah, thanks. Right? And like your nostrils are flaring and like your jaw is tight,
Tight. Yeah.
you're clenching, like subconsciously clients pick up on that
Oh,
and
yeah.
they can see like what it is that you're feeling in that moment. And so sometimes the hardest work is you might be feeling one way, like part of you might be really either anxious, nervous, frustrated, irritated. What you show like on the outside, it has to communicate that you are approachable and grateful, and you're able to have like this conversation
Mhm.
there. What do you think?
I totally agree. And one of the things that you were saying it, but you didn't explicitly say it, or I want to give an overarching maybe idea here, is that you begin by being curious.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Like that you want to attempt to understand. It's not about agreeing. We want to
Yes.
attempt to understand. You can validate what they have found. You can validate, that they were being very thoughtful. That does not mean you agree with everything that they have said.
Yes.
Um, and it's so hard, I think, sometimes to remember that. But it can make all the difference in the world because Ashley is. I totally agree, in that we want to be open, and who knows, they maybe this time they didn't find anything interesting, but like they could find something in the future, or you could just learn something about them, through this process, maybe a fear or a goal that they hadn't really had the words for at this point, but now they do. And even though it's maybe not going to change anything in their plan, you still grow closer, to the client and become more informed, and they in turn, grow closer to you. And so we thank them, and then we sort of allow them to talk, and we ask curious questions about what they have found. We validate, that's interesting. It seems like you've done a lot of work. It's thoughtful how you put this together. Any of these ways to validate and confirm, I hear you, I'm listening, I appreciate that you brought this in. Now, I think the next move, and perhaps you feel differently, so correct me if I'm wrong. If we've gotten them talking, and we've validated what they said, so now we actually do have an idea of what they want and why they want this thing in particular. Then I think we ask permission to sort of jump in, and I always like the way that you say, if I could offer. I think it's such
Hmm.
a nice way to say, would you be willing? I have some thoughts, as we've been talking. I have some thoughts. Would you be willing to kind of hear my perspective or hear some additional thoughts? Being careful to say, that's great. I heard you. Now I'm going to tell you like why you're wrong. Like, or not that an advisor would say that, but I think we all know that sometimes we listen just waiting to talk.
Yeah.
And
That writing reflex.
yeah, and it may be true. Again, it may be true that like what they want is not appropriate or not, what you're going to do. But we don't want it to sound like you were just waiting to say no, because you know that's not fun. They're not children where you're like, okay, give me your best, your best ideas for why we should go to the park, and then you hear them all and you're like, oh, still no,
Yep. No.
it doesn't work. And so I think moving from, if I could offer, or, I thought this was a valid point and this was a valid point, and I want to go into those a little bit different, and I have some perspectives that I would like to share. What do you think about that? That any way you can now kind of, in many ways, take control of the conversation, but doing so in a way that shows you are listening. Now also too, you can be thinking about how you want to connect some of these dots. It's not just about dismissing whatever they were bringing up full bore. Again, there may be things that you can pull out or address, or a conversation that you maybe want to kick down the road or something like that, so that it's not no, but it's not right now. Um, those things can all matter, I think, and just getting this to be a conversation, because that's ultimately what you want. You want to be teaching the client to have a conversation with you, and that there will be, a back and a forth.
I would agree with you on that. Would you be willing to hear some thoughts that I have? Or, that approach is great. The other thing that comes to mind here that I think is important is not assuming that just because a client is bringing something to you that they want to take action. And
Mm,
I think that this is a really great moment, and maybe it's done like simultaneously, like with what your approach, like, would you be willing to hear some thoughts? Or, okay, yes, well, hey, actually, before, maybe I jump into like some thoughts, can I just ask the things that you're bringing here today, like, is any of this something that you're wanting to take action on? Or are, you're just wanting to just talk about, like, how this relates to
mhm.
your situation or your plan? I think it's important to ask directly as a way of kind of assessing, like, is the client trying to take action? Like, are they trying to actually like make a change here? Or are they just wanting to like understand a concept or a thought,
Yeah.
or something like that? Because, here's the thing, if a client really just wants to understand, like, do they need to buy crypto, or is crypto like
Sure. Sure.
appropriate? Like, if they're just wanting to just understand, or even understand more fully, like, well, what really like is it? I've never dabbled in it, but I'm hearing now, or this came up in chat, shouldn't, I've never thought about this. If they're just trying to understand, then the suggestion or the feedback that you give is probably very different.
Yeah, that's a great point.
um, then do we need to take action? Are you wanting to change something or do something here? And I think I could be wrong. I could be wrong on this, but I would imagine that a lot of advisors in this situation likely assume that the
Hmm.
client wants to do something in this
Yeah.
moment, when really they might just want to have a conversation and understand this idea, this concept, this strategy a little bit better. And so, it reminds me of like just kind of the flow chart. I know I explain that all the time. Like, do you need new shoes? We all know where mine goes. Like, if it's yes or no, mine always goes to yes. Yes, I always need new shoes. But in this situation, like, does the client want to take action? Yes or no, right? If it's no, the conversation, your response might be a lot different than
Hmm.
if the client is like, yes, I do want to make some changes, or I do want to take action, or I do think it's important. And so I think maybe just knowing that, excuse me, I think just knowing that can be
Yeah,
really
that's a great point.
helpful in how the, kind of post, like, or the feedback or post conversation kind of goes from there.
Yeah, because that's always, I think that's part of, I can't say that's always, I certainly think that's part of the fear, at least in some of the people that have reached out to me. That it's like,
Yeah.
hey, my client, keeps asking me about, or, they asked if this belongs, in their portfolio. And they are assuming that the client is 100% already like, well, chat said I need to do it, so I need to do it. But I don't, again, I agree with you. I don't always know that that's the case. If we go back to this idea that people are just trying to feel out, like, because they have access to information for the first time, that they can sort of gather on their own and think about, and maybe even have, like, money is a language that we don't often practice with very many people. And now here comes Claude and chat that you can talk to them about pretty much anything, anytime, and they'll be very nice to you and very patient with you, answer like your dumb questions and things like
So
that.
validating
So
too.
validating. And and in that, people finally feel like, okay, I think I know enough about this, and I understand enough about myself, that I want to talk to my advisor about it. But this doesn't always mean that they actually want to act. And or I would still go back to what we talked about earlier, that the fact that they want to have this conversation with you and aren't, they're not asking you for permission. They are just wanting to have this conversation and probably hear your thoughts, because they value that. That they're really, I think that would be a really good, Yeah, I just really like that question of, so what do you want to do? Is this just something that you want to explore and think about, or is this something that you want to put a plan around or together, in some way for, tell me where you're at. I think that that's a, yeah, I think that's a really, really useful question. I guess then if they do say that they want to do something,
Mm.
the last step would be, to try to find a way to co-create.
Hmm.
I find it hard to believe that an advisor, especially in this day and age, like I know that crypto probably still feels pretty controversial for most people, so we'll use that as an example. If your client came to you and was like, "Look, I did the research, we've talked about it today, I want to do one of those ETF things, I just want 5% of my portfolio. I just think it's interesting, and they have all these reasons. Even if you typically don't do that, as an advisor, it's not a part of, how you manage investments. You could still agree with the client that, here's your 20 grand or, whatever you want. Go buy your Ethereum or something like that, over on Robinhood. But now as the advisor, you know about it, you can still incorporate it, into how you talk and what you talk about. Um, but you've maybe made your point clear that that you don't think this is necessary, but if they want to do it for this reason or that reason, and it's beyond the needs of the portfolio, which sometimes it is, um, then I would be hard pressed that there would be that many advisors out there that would just be like, no, like I will not, do this thing. And I'm saying that in the realm of like the client is asking to do something legal. I guess if they want to do something illegal, that's a different conversation.
Correct.
Um, but the important thing is that you would know what they're going to do, even if you believe that they need to do it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of collaboration. And then that's how I think about, a relationship like this.
Mm,
A professional relationship is that it is collaborative. And,
right.
that's an approach that I would take with my therapy clients is that, I might know a lot about relationship dynamics. I might know a lot about helpful interventions, but a lot about you and
You,
what
yeah.
works for you and how things like, and so there's like this mutual kind of agreement, whether it's said or not, that we are each the experts like in our own lane. Like I might be a subject matter expert in this particular area. Financial advisors are a subject matter expert, around like financial planning, but the client is the subject matter expert on their life and what they want to do, with that. And I think respecting that and honoring that allows then, us to work like in collaboration with each other.
Yeah, still
Um,
keeps the boundaries of the relationship strong, and
right, it
that,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've explained it before. Do you remember in driver's ed? I don't know if your driver's ed experience was like this.
We'll
But
find out.
um like when I took driver's ed in high school, um we the I would sit in the driver's seat and the driver's ed instructor, who is usually like a football coach. Like I don't know why like they were all like football coaches, but like ours was a football coach. Um they were there really to hit the oh crap break.
Right,
Like
right, right.
when like you started to veer off like the road or like and so they were there to hit the oh crap break of like whoa, hey, let's like slow down here. But I was in control, I would say, right, like
Mhm.
of the vehicle. And that's how I view relationships like this, albeit, therapeutic ones like, I had, or even financial planning ones, is, the client is in a driver's seat. You are there in the passenger seat. You can be the ride or die, and you're just there to hit the oh crap break, kind of when things get
Yeah,
messy. And to also guide of, hey, turn right at the stop sign, and then we're going to get on the interstate, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you can be there to like guide and be somewhat directive, but the client is really in control here. And so I think if you can just think of yourself as that person when a client brings, you know, information, let's just say from chat about whatever it is, like you can be the one to be like, hey, okay, I hear you. This is great. Thank you so much for bringing this. I'm glad we can have a conversation about this. Let's slow down a little bit and think about this a little bit more thoughtfully, right? Like that's that way of just gently like pressing that brake there to really like get a lay of the land and understand like, do you want to take action? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, you do. Maybe let's think about this. And, do we need to take action now? Or is this more of like a long
Hmm.
term, a direction, there? Oh, wait, no, you don't want to take action. You just actually want to have a conversation with me and learn more and be more invested in your financial life. Like, my goodness, what a wonderful client you are. Like, because you care about your financial plan. I think that that can be just a really helpful way if you pull back to just kind of look at the situation and then,
Hmm.
as we've kind of shared here, like figure out then how do I approach this? What angle like am I taking?
Right, right. Some of what you're talking about reminds me of a conversation we had a while back about like expectation setting.
Oh yeah.
And I think that advisors have to embrace that this is going to happen more and more often with clients that are great, with clients that are not so great, with clients that you never thought that they would, with clients that you absolutely thought what they would. You know, this has got its way into medical advice. This has got its way into the law. Like it's going to happen, and it's okay. But if you want to get ahead of it, then I think thinking now about, okay, so what is going to be the expectation? Like if I want to encourage clients to come in and talk to me, because you don't want them to just ignore you and go behind your back. Then the expectation is going to be, hey, you're going to come in, we're going to evaluate your decision, we're going to look at it, a few different ways. Like my job is going to bring, some opposing views, or I want you to bring some opposing views. We're going to talk about timelines. Like what would be, the 4, 5, 6, 12, points, the steps, thoughts that you would want to think through, the types of questions that you would want to ask, and then lay that out, so that clients know, hey, I want you to come talk to me. And every time you come talk to me, this is going to be the process, and some things will make it through the process and other things will not make it through the process. But we are agreeing up front that anytime you have any of these great ideas, that you want to share, that there's going to be an evaluation process. And setting clear expectations around that can help you to again be more open, because it's not just like, okay, whatever goes. Like no, we have like a process for this, and you can rest in that process, that they know it and you know it, and you can be open to whatever their idea is because there's a process for vetting it. And I think it lets the client know that, hey, this is not just like fly by the seat of our pants, we just kind of make stuff up, that there is a, some, well, all advisors know that this is all based in uncertainty. We never ever know, what's going to happen tomorrow. And so the best thing that we can do, is feel good about the decisions that we make. And that comes from having a process around the decisions themselves. And I think that you can reassure clients and reassure yourself, by putting something like that in place. And, some of the elements that we've talked about today, but, again, there may even be more things that you would want to cover specific to investments and policies and things like that that matter to you and your clients. And if that's like on the list of things you need to walk through, then, it's there now.
I think that's a great I think that's a great point for even advisors who maybe are listening and they're like, "Oh, I haven't a client has not done
Done
that
this
yet
yet.
with
Yeah.
me." Like, now is a great time from an expectation standpoint. You can go ahead, take some action and start to have that conversation or just bring it up, whether it's a review meeting, whether it's, a prospect meeting, discover whatever, where it doesn't matter like where the client is, how long they've been with you.
Mhm.
Like it can be something that you even put out like in a newsletter statement or something if you wanted to there of like, hey, like, we recognize that this is happening more and more. And here's our take on it. Like as
Yeah,
a firm,
I
this
like
is
that.
what we think. And this is kind of our process. And so we invite this. I think that that can be, and even if you have clients who have already done this, I think communicating something like that more broadly to all of your clients, it shows that you're proactive. It shows that, all the things that you said, like
Open.
you're
Yeah.
you're open, right? You're inviting conversation. And from a relational standpoint, like that's going to go a long way in building, that, relational equity there. Clients are going to be like, oh yeah, great. Oh, okay. My advisor wants this. And like, I can talk to them about this. Like
Hmm.
that's pretty freaking cool. Pretty
Yes,
freaking cool.
I think it's
Okay,
cool too.
Meg. So the last thing that I was thinking
Okay.
here,
I
everything
was
that
done with my
we've,
thoughts, so I'm excited, whatever this
I'm
is.
glad. Okay. All right. Well, I should have asked. That was so rude of me. I should have asked if you were done, like with all of your thoughts on this. I know you were so excited to have this conversation.
It's a neat
So
conversation. Yeah.
it is a neat conversation. I've actually enjoyed it. I enjoy all of our conversations. That was rude. I'm being really rude today. I'm
Yeah. You have your
gonna
RFB face.
uh, I don't even know if I can. I think I can do RFB. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible for me. I don't know if that's possible. I'm gonna practice it though. Maybe the next video, I'm gonna like bring it. I'm gonna bring it. Okay. So hey, what I was thinking with this conversation, and I was kind of excited and like, to share and or ask this. This is actually a really great um question. These are great scenarios to bring up in our advisor foundations community. Like if you have not heard of advisor foundations, it is a place online digitally. Maybe one day soon it'll be a physical place that we can create. But for now, it is a online digital community, if you will, where we talk about things like this. We answer questions like this. The community includes things like resources, scripts for how do I navigate conversations that are like this? How do I be a better listener? How can I work on things like being more open or my RBF? You know,
We can't
uh,
help you with
may-
that.
okay, we may not say that explicitly, but body language is I think
Body
what
language
we
for sure. Yeah.
is what we will call it. This is something that's really great to take to the Advisor Foundation's community to bring and talk about amongst your peers, but also like with us as well. Get some feedback, answer questions. You can attend one of our office hours that we hold where you can bring scenarios like this and we give you one-on-one or small group feedback there. So I wanted to just make a plug. I don't know how smoothly I did that. I'm working on it, but this is
Super
kind
smooth.
of a plug for, hey, like if this has been a challenge and if you have questions around this or other scenarios that come to mind, the Advisor Foundation's community is a really, 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 really great place to explore. To explore all of that. And so you can find information on our website. If you go to www.beyondthefp.com, if you scroll down the page, you will see advisor support. Click on that button and it will link you directly to the page where you can read more about the advisor foundations and even sign up if you are interested there. So that was my thought, Meg. I don't
That's a good
yeah, I
one.
don't.
I
Thank
was
you.
not thinking of that, so I like it.
Yes, that's usually a first. I feel like anything that I think you're generally somewhat maybe kind of thinking or it's brewing.
Except for your
So,
really smart thoughts. So
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I try. All right. Thank you to all of you for tuning in and to listening to Meg and I. If you have found this helpful, give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. Connect with us, reach out to us, let us know what you found to be helpful. You can also check Meg and I out in our separate places, but where we both show up to. Meg on her Less Lonely Money Substack. You can check out more of my work on planning and beyond, not planning from beyond, like Meg likes to say, podcast there. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn. Send us a message, shoot us a comment or two. Let us know what you're thinking. Anything else, Meg, that you want to leave the good people of Beyond the Plan Solutions with?
No, I think we got it all this time. I like it.
Ooh, that's a first. I like it too. All right. Thank you all for listening. Cheers and have a great day.
Cheers.